I'm your host, Dino, and get ready to be inspired as you learn exactly how to own your role. Welcome, everybody, once again to the Own Your Role podcast. Excited to have you here for another episode where we get to talk to unique entrepreneurs. And today is an episode that I'm excited to have all of you listen to and respond to, actually, because I've known Glenn, our guest, for, I want to say over a decade now. And he is not just an entrepreneur in the sense of he owns a practice. So he's kind of a forced entrepreneur like so many people are. He's really a business owner, where he has taken what he loves around being a business owner and expanded that into multiple businesses. One of them we are going to talk about specifically today because I get the honor to being a part of it as well in a couple of months. But Glenn Krieger is our guest today. Before we get to Glenn, we want to make sure we, again, thank all of you for sharing the podcast with your friends and colleagues out there, letting people know about it. We love when you come up to me at events and talk to me about the podcast and the last episode you listened to and you really enjoyed that, and the expert that we had on and what you learned from them. That just really means a lot to us, and it's why we keep doing what we're doing now, over 150 episodes in. So very excited about that. Glenn Krieger is the owner of Krieger Orthodontics, where he creates life-changing smiles. But that's just one thing that Glenn does. Glenn is the creator and CEO of the OP Summit, which is by far the most entertaining and production-oriented event out there, which is something, if you've been around me for a while, you know how much I love to produce things. So when Glenn comes out in different costumes or songs or creates opportunities and moments for everybody that is unheard of in our industry, it's really fun to see. He also runs huge study clubs for doctors to let them know how they can be better CEOs of their business, and not just a doctor. And when I say just a doctor, I'm not saying that to demean anything. I just think sometimes as business owners, we get so stuck in the weeds of the operation side of things, we forget that we are CEOs. We need our COOs. We need to be better business owners. And that's what Glenn helps people do. He's coached with people like Gary Vaynerchuk and so many other notable people that he's a plethora of knowledge. And we're thrilled to have him on the show today. Glenn, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dina. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here. You're somebody in ortho who's definitely one of the bright stars that we all sort of set our compass around. And so thank you. It's an honor.
Very kind. It's very kind. Well, Glenn, one of the things that we do on this show at the very beginning is I believe that stories are what connect all of us. And what I love to hear first is not really your bio. I want to know your story. Why did you choose the profession you did? And I understand through the rumor mill that there was actually a whole different career beforehand before you got into ortho. So we are excited to hear that story. What made you choose orthodontics, and why are you here today?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I love stories as well. Yeah, I did have a totally other career for 2 decades before I became an orthodontist. I was an exotic dancer.
Wow.
Yeah.
It makes total sense.
I'm so impressed with how you dance on your videos, Dino. Reminds me so much of my good old days. Joking aside, nobody would ever confuse me with an exotic dancer. That's why it's so funny. I was a dentist, right? My dad was a dentist. My grandfather was a dentist. And, I could give you the dental school application answer that makes all of us sort of roll our eyes nowadays, and that I love to help people and work with my hands. But I was always building things. I was always creating things. I was, fixing electrical stuff. I was doing plumbing, sweating pipes. I was always building. And, it's just natural for me to go into Dad's practice. But after I joined him, I learned very quickly afterwards that his style of practice and mine, his goals of what he wanted for his patients and what I wanted for mine were very, very different. All the power to him. He's a great man. I love him. He's my best friend to this day. Partly because I left him, right? And there's a theme in my life. I've run away from money, easy money, many times for things that, just didn't feel right. And I opened up my own practice, moved to Seattle in '96, practiced there for 2 decades because I wanted to be on the West Coast, where as a restorative dentist, Frank Spear, John Coyce, Vince Kokich, Ward Smalley, Dave Matthews, the periodontist, not the band, were out there. And I figured if I was around them, I'd learn. And Lord knows I was in the right place at the right time with the right people. And they sort of leaped my career so far ahead of where it would have been. But as I started doing more and more, I started realizing that I really wanted, and very few people know this part of it, so I'm glad I can share it with you. I started two things started to happen to me. Number one, I felt the profession in and of itself in dentistry was changing. It was going more from a craft to sort of a business, money driven, as the demographics needed less and less dentistry. Right, the baby boomers were starting to slow down a little bit. The newer generations needed less dentistry. I started seeing a lot of my colleagues, a lot of my peers doing things that didn't rub me the right way, really taking on huge amounts of interdisciplinary care that would, in my opinion at the time, be better suited with a specialist. And when I'd ask them why, it would be because it was better for the patient, and I would disagree vehemently. I felt a specialist was better for specialty work, and that's the lane I stayed in and made a really good living at. And as my program chairman later would tell me, my job at that point was learning more and more about less and less, not learning more and more about more and more. I wanted to become a specialist in the restorative dentistry world. And so I did that. And part of it was me feeling disillusioned a little bit with what was going on in dentistry at the time, that we were going into, a money-driven approach more than we were a craft-driven approach. And the second thing was I felt that if, with my background in restorative dentistry, if I could go into ortho, I wouldn't have to drill teeth down. I wouldn't have to destroy things to make them healthier. I could move them. I could work with biology, right? In restorative, literally every single thing I did had to be somewhat invasive, everything. And people would come to me and say, hey, Dr. Krieger, I love you, man, but I hate being here. Something you really never hear in ortho. And so my mentor, Ward Smalley, who I love to death, he was triple boarded perio, pros, and ortho, all out of the University of Washington. He sort of turned me on to the idea of ortho. And, my wife was getting tired of Seattle because it's a beautiful place for a few months a year, but it's really rainy and it's really dark. And it's a hard place to raise kids if you're not from there and don't have family. And so when she said she couldn't do it in Seattle anymore, back in 2010, I said, you know what? If we're going to start over again, what do you think about ortho? And she said, can we afford it? I said, not at all. She said, well, then go for it. And
Let's do it.
but that was a relationship, right? Dino, I've met your lovely wife. That's the way relationships are based, right?
Yep.
Your wife comes to you and says, I can't live here anymore. It's not a quote, well, I built this practice. And no,
right.
You got to leave.
Figure
we're
it
leaving,
out.
baby.
That's right.
And when I said to her, you know what, I want to go back as an ortho, she's sure, you could do it, honey. And so I applied to 55 schools and got into none. Me and Stuart Frost both talk a great deal publicly about the fact that neither one of us got into ortho our first time through.
Wow.
And he was a general dentist for a while. And ultimately I reapplied, and I'm going to give a shout out to Dr. Abraham Lifshitz, who is at the time technically the de facto sort of chairman of Nova Southeastern. And he saw something in me, and but for him, I wouldn't be an orthodontist today. He's very humble about it, and he would never ever say that, but it's true. And so became an ortho solely because I wanted to work with biology and not against it. And I always respected the fact that if you did ortho right, you could control everything, and you could set up a perfect restorative case for the restorative dentist. You could get the surgical outcome set up for the orthodontist, for the oral surgeon. You could help perio with the periodontist. You could really do so much good. And I was running to ortho and not away from restorative dentistry. So
wow.
There's my long story, Dino. Sorry for
no, that's great. There's so much to unpack there. And as you talk, and whenever I have guest talk, I have a note board here that I write notes. I don't want to interrupt you. I want you to keep going, because it's like, oh, we can talk about that. Oh, we can talk about that. and I love that organic, growth in a conversation, because there's so many different tidbits. I wrote down things like, man, you talk about practicing with your dad and realizing it's not quite the best fit for whatever reason. And I think there are so many people who are listening to this who can either empathize with that, have been through that, or maybe right now are struggling with that. And the bravery it takes between both of you to be able to have that conversation of, you know what, this is just not going to fit my style. I love you, Dad. You're my best friend. Let's not ruin our relationship, and actually be honest with one another about where this can go. The other one that you talked about was your leaps, like having people, knowing that it's other people who are going to help you make those leaps. I was at a mastermind just 2 weeks ago, and one of the guys there said something that I thought was so profound that fits in this. He said, we never get anywhere in our life without someone else vouching for us. And so you talked about that twice, two different people, well, other leaps, but then specifically, Dr. Adi says Lifshitz?
Yeah, Dr. Lifshitz.
Lifshitz.
Abraham Lifshitz.
that he, him seeing that something in you, that vouching for you,
Yep.
got you to be able to be where you are. And that viewpoint that you have, being both a general dentist and then also being able to be where you are. What a great way to be able to look at your patients holistically. And we talk about that a lot, I think, in ortho.
Yeah.
We talk about being a holistic orthodontist. What a better way than having that information in your back pocket to be able to say, oh, this is probably what your dentist is going to say to you, or these are the things we need to do
Right.
first. So much stuff there. That was an awesome introduction. I
Thank
love
you.
it.
You know,
Can I ask you a question? I want to go back all the way to, and I probably am asking this more on a personal basis because I've gone through a lot of this stuff with dads, and we all have our
right.
fathers' issues or whatever there. When you went to your dad and approached your dad about that conversation about, I don't think this is going to fit, however that approached it. Walk us through that a little bit. What was that like for you? What did it take you a while to do it? How did you get the bravery to do so? Tell us a little bit about that.
It was tough. When you were talking about it, I was remembering precisely where I was when we
Mm,
had that conversation.
wow.
Um, and again, my dad has always been my number one advocate, him and my mom. I mean, you always talk about your mom issues, your dad issues. I'm a big fan. Maybe you've heard me talk about it publicly about therapy when things are going well.
Mhm.
I've been more hours of therapy in my life than I can count. And you talk about, you always think about talking about your parents. I've never had a conversation once with any therapist about my parents because there's nothing to talk about. They were always so supportive and wonderful
That's so
and
cool.
great with me. So it was easy for me to approach him. And um, I think the writing was a little bit on the wall. He had a partner at the time who I think, you're never in someone's head, so I'm only guessing, who sort of saw me as a potential adversary or a piece of the pie, that would compete with him, and was very nasty, was very rude. I think my father did the best he could to try to
Mm.
ward it off, but I'm the kind of guy who wakes up every day really genuinely in my heart of hearts, imagining that the day is going to be remarkable, not just good. It's going to be an amazing day. I found out later in life that that's a blessing, that not everybody's built that way, right? Because you only know the way you're built. And
Sure.
so I didn't realize that people don't wake up every day dreaming about how wonderful the day is going to be. And there was a period of time in my life at that point when I was with my dad and his partner more. They had multiple offices, and I tended to work with the partner's office. I would literally wake up every morning dreading going to work. I didn't want to get out of bed. I didn't
Mhm.
want to, not because I didn't see good in the day, but I knew I was going to get abused. I was going to get beaten up. I was going to get talked down to. I was going to get made fun of. I was going to have nicknames thrown at me. I mean, he was just a
Wow.
real callous. And again, it begs the question, why was he my dad's partner? And it's a much longer story. But I didn't want to bring my dad into those conversations. It wasn't his business. I didn't need to make his life tough. So I just suffered it. Started seeing a GI doctor. I mean, I was getting sick physically.
Wow.
And so I think part of that made it easier, if you will, for me to have the conversation. Hey, Dad, I'm having a hard time here. It's never going to work out. Your style, my style. I can't tell you the exact words. And I could tell he was heartbroken by it. I mean, we all dream of your child going to dental school and working with you. And then all of a sudden they say, not going to do it,
Yeah.
it's heartbreaking. And I look back on my life now in my late 50s, and I don't know if you feel this way, Dino, because I think you turned 31
Early
last year.
50s. No,
Yeah,
no.
I thought you were 31, right?
Sure.
Um,
Let's go
but
with that.
when you're in the sunset of your life and not the sunrise of your life, right? Which I see myself in, I think there's a clarity of life that comes to you. I'm not going to call it wisdom, but I wish I could go back and make penance for all the things that I could have done better in my life. It's not regret, but I get teary eyed. I mean, I've cried over these things in the past in a cathartic way, that I wish I could have been more compassionate with my dad at that time. I wish I could have been um, more through his eyes. I wish I could have been a better college student, a better, young, just been there for my parents more. Like I wish, as a parent, I wish my kids would be, right. And so I wish if I could go back and do it all over again, I was compassionate. I could have been more compassionate. I could have been more mindful in how I had the conversation. It wasn't rude, nasty, or mean, and it came from a loving place. But I don't think it could have been too loving. I could have been better at it, and so I can't change it. I don't regret it, but I remember him supporting me 100%.
That's so
Um,
cool.
and there was no anger, hostility. And I was getting ready to get married, and so there was a lot of other good stuff going on in our
Mhm.
lives. And I think what my parents have instilled in me is two things. One, sunk cost bias doesn't exist, right? I mean, it
Mhm.
exists, but not in my life. So what you call fear, I just call no sunk cost bias, right? And for those out there who may not know, we often get, what's the right word? Anchored to positions because we've already done so much in that position. You know,
Sure.
I, I've, I've been working with my dad so long, it'd be stupid for me to move or something. Or the financial benefit of me staying with my father or my mother or my sibling is so deep that if I were to go out, I have to start all over again. And that's,
Right.
the sunk cost fallacy that,
Right.
the time and energy and effort you put into it is valuable to the point where it doesn't necessitate you moving on to the next stage. And for me, I was raised with there is no such thing as sunk cost. You tried it, it didn't work, move on. Right.
Wow.
Start again. You're going to be successful. Go on to your
Yeah.
next stage of your life. Go do my mom went back to law school when I was 10 years old. So
Wow.
I think it played a huge role in my life in saying, you know what? As my rabbi used to say, it's never too late, but it's later than you think. And so,
So true.
yeah, with my dad, it was never a second thought. And I think he saw the ease with which I did it. And I think whether he was putting on a brave face or not, I was just simply supportive of it. And it allowed me to really go on to that next chapter. And it was a great lesson for me to play, even if he was really hurting inside, which I think retrospectively he probably was. It was a great way of sending me off into that next chapter of my life, so there wouldn't be any regrets, so that I wouldn't feel like I was letting anybody down. And I think it was just a model way for a parent to behave. And to this day, I'm in love with my parents, but I'm so impressed in the way he handled that.
Yeah, it's very impressive. And when you really think about it, it makes sense too with the type of person you are. And I'm even thinking in my own life of like, you would behave probably the same way with your kids in the sense of maybe even if you did have that disappointment inside, you're going to outwardly support them because you know that's what they need and you love them and you want them to have that. I love the sunk cost bias idea. So many people, and I know I've fallen victim to this myself of like, well, I'm already pot committed. I can't really, turn it around. I can't decide to fold right now and then go do something else. And this is where we see so much frustration and depression. And unfortunately, when that does happen, when you're feeling in that space of stuck because you've made one decision, you feel like you can't make another, you lash out on other people. You bring it out into your work. You're not as creative as you could
Right.
be. You're not the best leader you could be. So I love that idea of it. And I also appreciate that you talk about when that there's a physical reaction to a mental challenge, that you had to go see a doctor because you're having physical ailments based
Yeah.
upon the stress and the mental stress that's happening in your life. It's so crucial. And I hope what people are getting through this conversation is number one, it's okay to talk about it. Number two, that we all have stuff, we all have stories, and it's a matter of how you actually react to it. It's a matter of how you can wake up in the day and say, you know what, how awesome is today going to be? Like,
Yeah.
this is going to be a great day. And I love that you said that, Glenn, because I probably do that to a point to where it almost annoys my kids and my wife a little bit. It's
No,
like,
no, it annoys him, Dino.
awesome,
It's
let's
not
do it.
almost annoying. It
That's it.
annoys.
It annoys them. It's like my wife is not a morning person, right? Speaking of wives, I want to end this section on this part because I thought it was so important that you talked about the wife support of what you got
Yeah.
with your wife when she said, "Hey, you know what? I believe in you." I often say that the number one motivator of men, I talk about the motivators for men and women, and the number one motivator for men is to feel like the superhero, to feel like what I do is causing a good positive difference, especially in the life of the one person we chose to
Yeah.
live life with on this planet. And if we can have our Lois Lane, who is like, oh my gosh, I support you in what you do, and I believe in you, and you got this. I've said before, where I live in Utah, there's a place about 4 hours away, 3 hours away called Price. And that's where a lot of coal mining is done. And I believe that for whatever reason, I grew up doing concrete construction. So I don't like that either. But coal mining to me has got to be one of the most challenging jobs that I could think about. You're in
Oh,
the
yeah.
dark, you're in the soot, it's ugly, it's all that stuff
And dangerous.
and dangerous. But if I was married, if I was a coal miner and I was married to my wife, I know that I married someone who would do what you said. Honey, You're the best coal miner in the world. If you want to go and be you go be a coal miner. You're going to be the best at it. You're amazing. I support you 100%. I have some questions maybe, but I do support you in that. And to have that,
And you'd work your tail off.
You work your tail off
to
too.
make her proud of what you're doing.
That's right. And that's kind of where I was going to go with this is you in your career, and this will help us pivot a little bit, is that you've made some shifts, but then you've also added to the already heavy workload that comes with being an orthodontist, that comes with being someone who is a professional and an entrepreneur and a CEO. How do you two have that discussion around, hey, honey, I'm going to do this other thing now. I'm going to add to this thing now. How's that gone for you?
You know, it's really funny. My wife and I, both Jewish, grew up in the Northeast. You know, when we moved, we've lived everywhere, right? I was born in Chicago when Dad was in the service as a dentist. And then we moved to New York. And then I was trained in New York. And then we moved to Seattle for 17 years. And then I went to Nova Southeastern down in Florida, spent 3 years down there. Then now we're in Dallas, right? We've been all over the country. And when we're outside the Northeast and we go to dinner with friends, they think we're fighting, like we're communicating. We're loud.
Nice.
You know, if you ever read the Gottman books, which I have no doubt, you know, John and Julie Gottman, living in Seattle, we heard all their stuff all the time.
Sure.
And for anybody out there, by the way, who's never read Fight Right, you need to read it. It's one of the greatest books in conflict, not just between husband and wife, but with everybody.
In general, yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing, amazing how it'll change your whole perspective on discussions with patients, team, partners, wife, husband, boyfriend, girlfriend. And we're volatile. We're both volatile types. It doesn't mean it's bad, but we know there's persuasion from the moment you start the conversation. And so we communicate really quickly, really loudly. People think we're fighting. We're not. You know, one therapist once said to my daughter's school counselor, said, "I'm really worried about those two. I think they're, you know, I'm really worried about the dynamic." And the therapist said to her, "Don't you worry about those two. They're going to get buried next to each other, you know, 60 years from now." And so we've always had that relationship that was loud, boisterous, but loving. And apparently, according to the Gottmans, you know, there's probably a 10-to-1 positive bid to negative bid sort of relationship, which, you know, which is the key to long-term success.
Yep.
And so we don't have those conversations that often, believe it or not, you know, Dino, when I say, you know what, I'm going to start Orthopreneurs, right? The group, there was a casual, that oddly enough was one of the few times in my life that I've ever had the conversation with her. We're a very traditional family unit in that, you know, she went for a master's degree. She has a master's in speech pathology. When we had kids, it was less expensive almost for us to have her raise the kids than for her to go to work.
Yep.
And we decided together as a couple, you know, it's probably better for you to be the influence in the kids' lives, and I'll just work harder, be a single income earner for this family. And that's the way it went. And so whenever I took on a new burden, it was already sort of tacitly implied that, you know, Glenn, Alyssa, you go take care of the house, you take care of the kids, you take care of everything that's going on. I'm here to support you whenever I can. And her sort of marching orders to me were, you go out and you do the best you can, honey. And, you know, if you feel there's something out there that's going to manifest more money in our lives, going to create something better in our lives, I trust you enough, go get it. We don't have to talk about it. And we would have the conversations. But I do remember, for those people out there who know what Orthopreneurs is, you know, it started as a Facebook group in 2017 when there was a very famous blow up in one of the ortho groups. There was an argument. I can tell you who, it doesn't matter.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was.
I didn't know the origins of that. That's interesting.
Yeah, and it's funny actually because, you know, Ben Burris started it, and but for Ben Burris, who's a controversial figure in orthodontics, but for him, most of these Facebook groups wouldn't even exist in orthodontics because he really was a driving factor in all of them. And him and my friend Chris Feldman, you know, it was about Smile Direct Club, and they would go at it, and neither would back down, and they went toe to toe, and it was an epic battle one day in this Facebook group. Well, oddly enough, that morning, I had sort of felt the toxicity going on in the group, and I turned to my wife and you know, we went for a walk with the dogs, which we never did. And I remember saying to her, I'm thinking of starting a group of my own. And she'd go for it, honey. You know, what are you going to do it for? I said, just to help people, no ulterior motive. And I came back from the walk and my phone had blown up. There were like 25 messages. Did you see what happened? Did you see what happened? And it was at that moment I just posted and said, hey, you know, I reached out to my friend Ben Christman out of Florida, who's my little bro in ortho residency. I said, here are 3 names. You know, which one of these do you think should be a good name? He said, Orthopreneurs. I said, good. And little did I know that there already was an Orthopreneurs marketing agency at that point.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, there was an orthopreneur. I didn't know it. So I did it, started it, and next morning woke up, we had 700 people in the group, and it just took off from there. So that's about as deep of a conversation as we've ever had, because unless it was going to truly impact our family unit in a bad way, which I really tried to avoid, she was going to say, sure, go get it, honey. Get him, Tiger. And that's how Orthopreneurs got started.
Wow, that I had no idea about that story. That's amazing. And yet again, just evidence of, first of all, I want to back up. I love that you talk about how you and your wife communicate. Absolutely love the Gottman stuff. Everything they come up with is gold. I mean, just follow them on Instagram and you're going to learn a
Oh,
ton.
the
Uh,
greatest.
but that you and your wife know each other and you know each other enough to give that trust. I totally relate to the traditional side of things too. We were in LA at the time when we started having kids, and no way could we afford daycare and us both to be working, and it just made sense. And my wife always wanted to be a mom and wanted to be a stay-at-home mom, and it's been amazing. And again, the same, like, you got this, you can do this, I believe in you. And what you said right before I asked that question is so crucial, for I think so many people understand that we will work day and night to make sure that that dream comes true, right? For our spouse, we will do whatever it takes to make that happen. And you can see in the fruits of your labor of what actually is going, and how successful that is. And that's amazing. So Orthopreneurs starts, and this is a great segue then. So Orthopreneurs starts as a Facebook group. And when did you have the harebrained idea to create an actual convention, basically? When that's what I look at. I mean, I think there are certain things, like we have AO coming up for the time this is being recorded in a week. And that's great. It's a cool event for people to go to. It's one of the biggest ones out there, obviously, because everybody and their brother comes to that. But you went, let's make this almost a theatrical production. What was that thinking, and why did you get into and thinking that would be a good idea?
I'll get into that. I want to just touch, if I can go backwards just for
Sure.
1 second, because I think we have some common ground here that I really want to get out in the open, because I
Yeah.
say it whenever I get a chance to. I talked about therapy, right? I talked about, and I know you have a history of, I've learned your former history and current history with helping couples and families
Yep.
and what have you.
Yep.
And, you'll hear all these isms: don't go to bed angry, don't wake up angry, just, do this, do that. And I think they all help and they're wonderful. The best advice I ever got in my life, believe it or not, was from a guy who had run off with his front desk woman.
Oh
He
no.
was older than me by about 15, 20 years, but, not in his relationship, not in his life.
Sure.
I
Yep.
never judge.
Yep.
Um, and I don't know what was going on, but he left his wife for this young, he was in his 60s, she was probably 25. I don't
Wow.
get it. I don't get it. But hey, whatever, whatever. And we were having dinner one night, and I'm not going to just leave a friend because of something like that, who knows? And so I just said to him, "What's the best advice you can give me?" And he said, "Go for therapy when things are good." And so I just want to get out there, Dino, two
I
things.
love that.
One, if you're in a good relationship, number one, go for therapy. It's amazing. It'll put that cherry on top of the sundae. It'll take what you think is good and make it better, if you find the right therapist. And number two, I'm glad we live in a day and age where the word therapy is not a pariah anymore, right?
Yeah.
Because there's people out there, guys like you and I, we're just wired a certain way.
Mhm.
I call it a blessing because I had nothing to do with it. Mental health issues run throughout my entire family on both sides: severe depression, suicide,
Yep.
anxiety. Everybody's on meds, and there's no stigma there. But I'm the anomaly. I'm the Marilyn Munster of the family, if you will, right? And I suspect you are as well.
I
And,
totally am. I
and
love
that
that
and that
analogy.
we never met a day we didn't like, for the most part.
Yeah.
And we have to realize that there's so many people out there who aren't wired that way,
Mhm.
who are dreading going to work every day, even when things are good, who don't think they're good enough, who have depression, who have anxiety, and they need help. And I'm just putting it out there because I know
Mm.
it doesn't need to be said. If you're struggling with anxiety, depression, anything like that, get help. It's okay. There's no stigma associated with it. You're no less of a human being. You will live a better life because every person has the ability to live their best life. And it breaks my heart, like literally almost brings me to tears right now, thinking about the fact that there are people out there who need help, who feel like I don't want to get help. I'm not going to go see a therapist. It's, I'm not crazy. And folks, nowadays, mental health counseling is so accessible and so wonderful. And again, I'm putting it out there if it's okay.
No, I appreciate
469
that.
610 9920. If you ever have an issue, text me.
I love that.
Right? We're there for you. I have a very strong sheepdog mentality, which was why I started Orthopreneurs. We're out there to help serve others around us. And if you're out there struggling, because we talked about therapy earlier, I'll always pitch this in and say, reach out to me, reach out to Dino, get help.
Yep.
If you don't know where to start, let's work on this together and find the place for you to start. So sorry, Dino, I need to just
don't be sorry at all. No apology necessary. I'm so glad you brought that up. And, I don't know if you know this or not, but one of the reasons why I got into this space, Scott Law, mutual friend of both of ours, he was the first one to call me up and he was asking for help. He asked me for help. We had a mutual friend. I didn't know Scott from Adam, and he asked me for help. But once I got into the industry, and specifically in the dental side of things, when I started seeing the huge number of suicide rates and divorce rates, one of my mission and why I do what I do is to reverse the direction of divorce, addiction, and suicide amongst private practice owners and their team members. That's why I do what I do every day. That's why I dance on the stage. That's why I give the message I do, because I try to give my message in a manner that can be heard without feeling like there's any stigma or a challenge around it. And when I'm in front of, you're right, I am an odd dog. I love that analogy of the Marilyn Munster thing, right? Because I am, my family, my son, my mom, everyone has dealing with mental health issues. Well, what it does for me is that it gives me the ability when I stand on stage is not to say, hey, be like me. It's to say, hey, let me give you some thoughts and ideas and maybe some concepts that can help you want to seek out therapy, want to seek out help, want to realize that it doesn't have to be this way if you choose the right path or want to choose the right path. So I really appreciate you saying it. It's such an issue in our industry. I think more so than we do talk about. And I'm not going to put a stigma of male or female on either side. I will just say that I do feel like sometimes it's harder for men to put their hand up and say, you know what, I need some help because of what I said earlier, where we will work day and night for our loved ones to make sure that we get it done. We often forget to think about ourselves and not to burn ourselves out. So
amen.
I absolutely.
And by the way, Dino, asking for help and being vulnerable makes you more of a man.
Totally. 100%.
Totally. I can serve my wife. I can serve my daughters. Sorry, I don't know if you hear the thunder in the background. Is that bothering you?
No, but I said the flash on your thing.
I think we'll have a tornado coming through, but don't worry. You're way more important.
It's just Texas.
Yeah. But by being vulnerable, I'm a far better father. I'm a far better protector. I know my limits and I will put my feet right up to them to protect those around me. If I don't know where they are, I'm endangering everybody. And so I'm just saying,
I love it.
Yeah. So I'm sorry you asked about orthopreneurs and I ended up in a soapbox moment about mental health.
Yeah, but I'm going to guess, Glenn, just by being the man that you are and what you just said right now, I'm going to guess, and you can correct me on this, that a huge part of orthopreneurs is this conversation, is having a space where a lot of these men can come, or women, everybody who's a member of orthopreneurs, to be able to say, hey, I'm struggling, or, hey, I don't know what to do, or, man, I am at a loss, which in my opinion, and I'm an outsider, right? I'm not an orthodontist, I'm not a dentist, I didn't go to dental school. But from what I've seen, when we're dealing with a group of high performing individuals who have spent their whole life being able to figure it out, put their nose to the grindstone and just study harder and they'll figure it out. And when you can't figure out what's going on in here or how to deal with this issue or how to control people that are uncontrollable, your team members, they need a place to go. And in my opinion, it seems like this would be where OP Summit falls into place.
Yeah, you said it perfectly. And, most of the orthodontists I know, right? I grew up, no pun intended, I cut my teeth with dentists, right? I know the dental field.
Yeah, you do.
And it's a different breed of individual who goes into ortho. Not to say there's anything wrong with general dentists. I mean, that's what I was for 20 years, and I maintained my fellowship in the Academy of General Dentistry. But orthodontists, when you go into a room with most of them, they're charismatic people, generally by nature. I can't stand the fact that I'm the ugliest guy in the room, always at every ortho meeting.
Whatever.
They're fit. You know, they were top of their class. They speak multiple languages. They're a black belt in some martial art. They play an instrument as an aficionado, right? I mean, like they've done mission works. They're disgustingly accomplished individuals. My partner, Doug Shaw, you would never know, number one in his dental school class, did 2 years in Samoa, speaks Samoan fluently, was an Eagle Scout with multiple palm. I mean, like, this is your average orthodontist. So they get to this point in their life where there's a problem they can't power through. They can't get through it on their own. And they don't know how to ask for help. Some, not to mention the regular dynamic that comes along with it, where you might be a sole wage earner barely making a living, right? Doug used to ask me I don't know how you sleep at night, you know, when we were first coming out of school. And add to that moms, right? Add to that, you're a mom taking care of kids, going to run a practice as a CEO. You know, I watched my own mother do it when I was 10 years old. And, you know, God bless everybody who does this. Just ask for help, be a part of the community. And like, Orthopreneurs is a good place to ask that question. And in the last couple of years, I've really gone out of my way to make it a vulnerable space. You know, you got a huge ego, check it at the door. And again, online, the challenge is that you don't really know somebody online. You just don't. And so I've heard people call this person high ego when in fact I know they're not. And I've seen them say this person's so humble when in fact they've got an ego you can't fit through a doorway. And so just, as I said earlier, anybody has a problem, reach out to me. I know they can reach out to you. We'll put them in touch with the right resources. You can post anonymously in Orthopreneurs, so nobody will ever know.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's a cool feature we turned on a couple of years ago that Facebook offers. You can put an anonymous post out there. Sometimes people abuse it, you know, hey, I'm looking for the right brand of Cheetos, you know, anonymously, right? But when used properly, it really is a powerful tool.
Yeah.
And so I never answered your first question, Dino, about Orthopreneurs.
Yeah, let's talk about it.
So what gave me the harebrained idea, I think were your exact words. To do this. And
I only say that, but I'm sorry to interrupt, but I only say that because I run events. I live events. I know what it's like, not to the scale that that OP Summit is, but geez, even at the small scales, it's a lot. So yeah, that's why I say harebrained.
But if you love it, right? Number one, I'm the guy, people who don't really know me, generally have me pegged completely wrong. Just because I love podcasts and I like being out there, I am actually an INTJ. I'm an introvert. People don't know that about me. I gain my strength from alone time, not from being in the public eye, but because I'm in the public eye, people just naturally assume I'm an extrovert. And so for me, I'm the guy who goes to a party. I don't want to go to the party in the first place. Just be clear. Honey, we got that party tonight. I'm like, oh, do we have to go? I don't want to go to the party. It's going to be people. I don't want to be around people. Right. And, but I want to go to the party and have a one-on-one conversation with somebody the whole night. I don't want to meet 50 people. But if I do, you'll see me saying, hey, Dino, do you know Jamie? You know, you guys should really talk. So I found myself as a natural connector. That's what I do in life. That's my social capital, is connecting people. And I didn't know that about myself until I was in my 50s. And my partner, Doug, said, you know, dude, you're like the best connector I've ever met. And I said, I didn't even know that. But Orthopreneurs was just sort of an outbranching of that. I didn't realize I was doing it, but I wanted a place where people could come together. I felt that the AAO meeting is very broad, but let's be honest, most of us feel that we don't go there to learn a massive amount. We go to see people we haven't seen in forever, to peruse, 250, 300, 400 booths to see what's out there, to see some good lectures. But it doesn't serve the purpose. To me, it's a really good Marriott. You know, it serves a purpose. Nobody's ever going to call it a Ritz-Carlton. Nobody's ever going to call it a St. Regis. And there's a reason why, you know, these great hotels stand. So I said, you know what? I want to create a meeting that's like GORP for those who already have a job. And for those out there, you know, if you don't know what GORP is, it's a meeting where once you get into ortho residency, they run this great party basically for 2 days. And you're wined, you're dined. And I didn't see that for people who already were graduating, who already were orthodontists. And I said, you know what? Let's do this. Let's create a meeting where the theatrical production, as you mentioned, is off the charts, where we create, and this was my mission originally, create an atmosphere where we exceed expectations that people didn't even know they had when they came in. Nobody ever came in and said, I need a marching band, right?
Right.
But My signature move, it started off was on the second day, on the first day, the marching band comes in out from the back of the room, 200 piece Texas marching band, plays a song, national anthem. We always start with national anthem at any meeting I run. But nobody expected that. And all of a sudden I come to meetings now and people are like, Glenn, you think they're going to have a marching band? We started with couches. The first 5 rows of orthopreneurs had white leather couches
Yep.
with tables next to them and glow cubes. Why? Because I wanted to create this exclusive club feel to people. And now I went to NISO a couple of years later. They had couches. And so the goal was to create this expectation to raise the bar and help everybody think differently about, hey, we worked our tails off to get into this profession. The people on that stage, they worked their tails off to become the speakers they are. Your team worked their tails off to support you. Let me work my tail off to treat you the way you treat your team and your patients, or hopefully do. And that's where it all came about. And a quick little funny story, again, that very few people know, that's hysterical, because I know you love stories.
Yeah.
Our first meeting was in June of 2018. So we started Orthopreneurs in 2017. We started Orthopreneurs RD in May of 2017. And then I came up with a harebrained scheme to have a summit in June of 18. And so we did it at the Omni Frisco here in Dallas, which also is attached to the home of the Dallas Cowboys. And it was a brand new hotel being built. We went into it on a hard hat tour. And I remember Doug and I, my partner, we had just started our practices a few years earlier. We had no money, nothing whatsoever. And we had just signed on the dotted line. You know this, you run a meeting. People don't realize this, that when they book their hotel room in the room block, you've personally guaranteed every room. People don't know that, right? So when you have when you say we've got 300 rooms for 3 nights, that's 900 room nights at $300 an hour that you just guaranteed. And that's $270,000 that Dino Watt is on the hook for.
Yep.
And so when people say, well, I'm not going to stay at that hotel, I'm going to stay somewhere else.
I'm going to find a cheaper one. It's like, no.
No, dude, it comes out of your pocket if you don't sell them all out. And so I remember we had just signed the contract. The hotel had just been built. They sent us downstairs to their lunch place. They here, have lunch on us, right? We just had a hard hat tour. And I'm sitting across from Doug. And to his credit, my relationship with Doug is exactly like my relationship with my wife. Built on trust, built on love. I've always said never, ever, ever, ever partner with anybody for anything other than love. I don't care if somebody comes to you and says, I got 8 practices, we should merge. I'm your competitor, we should join. We work the same brackets, we should. No. Right. Always join somebody because you cannot imagine living your life without them in your life professionally. And so Doug and I were like that. We were residents, co-residents, and there's a true love there for each other. And so he's always been patient, like my wife has been patient, and said, Glenn, you go be Glenn. You go be Glenn, and I'm going to mind the shop so it doesn't burn down. And that's how Doug and I have worked. So we're sitting across from each other, having lunch. He has no idea why we're doing this meeting. None. He's just following Glenn, being Glenn. And we just literally signed on the dotted line for $270,000 in rooms. I probably have $1,000 in my checking account. He probably has the same amount in his checking account. We're barely making ends meet, but I know this meeting's gonna be great. And we're eating lunch. Halfway through we're sitting in a booth across from each other. And he literally drops his fork and his knife in the middle of eating, like drops on the table and goes, how are you not freaking out over this? And I said, freaking out over what? He goes, dude, we just signed for $270,000 in rooms. What happens if it doesn't work out? I just looked him in the eye and said, it's going to work out. Don't worry, man. I'm telling you, this is not foolhardy. Nobody's ever had a meeting like this. The profession needs a meeting like this. People need a meeting like this. People need to feel taken care of. They need to face wonders. They need to be excited and be part of a production and learn at the same time. And nothing like this exists. And he trusted me, finished his lunch. He may have gone home and visited the GI doctor. But I said, here's how many doctors we're going to have at our first meeting. And here's how many we're going to have at our second meeting. And here's how much money we're going to lose on the first meeting, because we're going to make it so good, we're going to lose money. And it's okay. It's a calculated loss. And literally, we were within 5 doctors of my projection. We lost exactly what I said we'd lose the first year. And I said, second year, we're not going to make money either. We're going to break even. Second year, we went from 285 doctors, people, to 750. And I said, we're going to break even. And we did. And by doing so, we established, hopefully, a reputation in the eyes of people around us of of the kind of meeting that's very different than anything else that's out there.
Well, and taking that risk, it paid off for sure. But it was, like you said, it was not foolhardy. It was a calculated risk. It was understanding what you're getting into. And I think too often people do invest into something, try something, and it doesn't work out the first time. Or it doesn't go the way that they exactly expected it to. And so they pull back and they don't push forward. They don't lean in. And you
Yeah.
definitely lean in. And I want to just point out a few things I think it's worth repeating. I absolutely understand. And I think a lot of people understand about being an introvert. About that is me. I love my alone time. I love being here. I love running errands with my wife. That's one of my favorite things to do. I,
Amen.
I don't know. Like if I don't have to go to a party or be involved in stuff, great. Totally good. And like you said, talk to the one person, make that connection. I do have a really, I think, important question for you because I completely understand what you're saying about raising the level and making sure you're letting these people who are coming feel like I want to bring the best to you because you've worked so hard and you deserve the best too. It's actually one of the reasons why when I first got into this industry was speaking, when I started speaking on stages for the industry of going, wow, we got to raise the level of how people actually perform on stage and how they deliver a message and not just data dump on people. But you said something I'm going to challenge you on that I'm really concerned about. How are you going to get a marching band on the cruise?
Oh, you just gotta wait and
You're doing
watch.
it. Oh, I thought you
No,
were gonna
I'm
say.
not.
I
I'm
I honestly
not.
thought you were gonna be like, oh yeah, Dino, we're not doing
Spoiler
that on the
alert.
cruise.
You
Oh my
know,
goodness, I'm totally
spoiler
blown
alert. There's
away.
no marching band. You know, if it was a professional marching band, I would most certainly have them on the cruise, right? But it's hard to find a professional marching band.
Yeah.
Number two, this is, and for those people who don't know it, right?
Yes, please.
In September 18th to 21st, out of Tampa Bay, we rented an entire Royal Caribbean cruise ship for this year's summit. Why not, right?
Why
And
not?
Royal Caribbean's a great brand. We figured that they could do what we need them to do, and so we took over 1,000-foot long, 130-foot wide Serenade of the Seas. It's a great ship, and it's only going to be orthos and families, and I mean they have childcare from morning to night, so the moms and the dads of young kids can go let their kids stay in daycare and go sit at the adult pool. And
That's
when
right.
a little secret, because I've done that with my wife and our kids when they were young, when you go to pick them up, they don't want to come with you. So
That's
just
right.
don't force them, go have more fun.
Yep.
Right. And it's like around the clock. So you can go out to dinner. I mean, it's wonderful. And so because it's at a cruise, all the dynamic changes. Like nobody's ever done this before. There have been
Right.
cruises, but there's never been where you own the entire ship for 4 days.
Entire ship.
Yeah.
Yes.
I loved it when I went on the cruise, the shakedown cruise with them to go check out everything. Well, how would we set up this? How would we do that? Because you have to do everything from A to Z.
Yes.
I would ask them, hey, by the way, the casino, am I allowed to make it non-smoking? You know, and the woman stopped, turned around and goes, sir, this is your ship. You can do whatever you want. I
Wow.
didn't wow, I didn't realize that. She goes, yeah, if you want non-smoking casino, it is a non-smoking casino. I said, wow, I
Awesome.
had no idea. Like, can I drive the ship? Sir, you cannot drive the ship.
No, that's you've rented the ship. You don't own the ship. That's
Yeah,
right.
but I could technically say, you see that island over there that we're supposed to go to? I don't want to go there today. And technically, I think she said
Wow.
they could turn away from it and go, no, we're not going today because Glenn said no
And
island.
said,
But the beautiful thing about a ship, and I learned this, is that what's going on stage, like when you're speaking at the meeting, it will be simulcast throughout the entire ship.
oh
So
yeah, that's awesome.
potentially, we're working it out. You could be sitting in the pool with a pina colada in your hand at 9 a.m. We'll talk about that another time. Um, watching the giant screen, or you could be in your room eating breakfast, watching on the simulcast. Like the cool part about it is that's why I don't have a marching band, because while the auditorium holds 1,000 people, and we expect to have somewhere between 1,400, 12 to 1,500, give or take.
Uh-huh.
We know there's going to be a fair number who won't be in that room watching the marching band come in. So it creates a whole new system of things
Yeah,
we have to think about.
totally.
But hey, we're going to have a rock wall climbing contest. We're going to have a miniature golf contest. We're going to have
Nice.
like so many things that we can do here that we can't do ordinarily. And so it should be fun. I don't know. We're going to find out, right?
Dude, I'm really excited about it. And the fact that you have had this big of a vision really in such a short period of time with the beginning of Orthopreneurs to now, and to create this opportunity for people, one of the things that's probably the biggest challenge I feel with most cruises is the other people that are there that you're like, these are not my peeps. When you have a full boat of people who are in at least one very specific way, they're your peeps. There's not a single person on that boat that you can't have a conversation with about something, whether it be ortho related or going to school related. You get to have the reunions that you talked about that you do at the AAO, but you can do it on the boat. You get to meet the families, the spouses can connect with one another, the kids get to connect. I want, here's what I think is cool is I want people to really think post cruise. My biggest focus in life is the fact that relationships are everything. Everything I've ever received in my life up to this point is from a relationship. Even us having this conversation, everything I will ever receive is from a relationship. Can you just imagine for a second the amount of relationships that you will build, not because you were at some little group on a cruise with people, but because everybody on that cruise can totally relate to what you're going through. The amount of relationships that you're going to build from that, and then be able to lean on, be able to help, be able to ask for help from after. It's mind-blowing, actually. You're right. It's something that's never been done before.
Do you remember, again, I'm going to date us right now, Dino.
All right.
There was a great movie with Tom Cruise when he was really young, when he was with Paul Newman, called The Color of Money.
Absolutely.
Amazing movie.
Like 6 months ago again. Yeah.
And I think it was a sequel to The Hustler.
Yep.
But in that movie, it's about pool and tournaments. There's a great statement that's made in that movie that I've never forgotten. It really is applied to orthopreneurs. And I think the real essence of this meeting is, he says in the movie, the real money isn't made in the tournament. It's made in the back room after the tournament, right? After they get knocked out of the tournament, they go into this back room and they all play pool. And that's where the wagering really happens. And the real learning at orthopreneurs, yeah, it happens on stage. No question. And it should happen on stage. But the relationships and the deep, deep, deep things that you're going to take back with your practice, they happen at the dinner table. They happen on the deck of the cruise. They happen on the miniature golf course, right? You say, oh, you're an orthodontist? Cool. Where you practice? Oh, here. I've seen it hundreds of times. By the time they're done with that 15, 20-minute interaction, they realize how much they have in common and how much they can learn from each other. And suddenly the real deep conversations, the ones you can't have with a lecturer on stage, are happening. Right? Like, hey, how do you manage this? You're building a new practice. My wife, she gets on me all the time about this. She's getting so upset. How do you manage family? Like, all of a sudden, the real conversations start happening. And that to me is just, it's amazing. And again, teams, the same thing. This year, there's so many people bringing big team because it's the least expensive summit we've ever had, because they come with the ticket. The ticket's included with their cabin, which is very reasonable.
Yeah.
And I always say to them on stage, day one, is to the team, this is not a gift. This is not a vacation. You need to earn this, right? You had an investment made and you go back and earn this. And I hope that this year, when they hear me say that, it means go find another TC from another practice on the ship. Go have drinks with them. Go have a lunch with them. Go learn from them.
Stay in your little group bubble. Go connect with others. Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah, I remember you saying that at the last event. I use a quote in a lot of my speeches. It's actually a quote from me, which is, research shows that only 20% of entrepreneurs actually invest in their team members to going to things like this. And I know in our industry, it's the same thing. This is an investment in those team members. And I know we're at the end of our time, and I want to wrap this up with a couple of things. Number one is, man, if you are even thinking about going to OP Summit on the sea, like, this is a no-brainer time. It's what a great excuse, right? Oh, we're gonna go on a cruise, and we're gonna write it off, and we're gonna it's just an opportunity to number one. Where do they go to sign up at opsummit.com, or where do they go?
opsummit2024.com. Okay. opsummit2024.com. It leaves out of Tampa. I think it starts Wednesday evening. I think September 18th. And I runs through the 20. You come back to Tampa Sunday morning. You're literally missing a day or two of work, and make it up a month or two beforehand. It's like, come on. And by the way, Dino, the weird thing is, you know, the number one reason why people are hesitant to sign up for this cruise? Take a guess. What do you think the number one reason is?
Having their team members get totally smashed drunk.
That's reasonable.
Or no, seasick.
People are worried about being seasick.
Oh,
and
seasick.
And I'm trying to explain to them, number one, this boat is 1,000 feet long, 130 feet wide, with a stabilizing system underneath it that was described to me as a Cadillac Escalade weight that goes back and forth to keep the boat from sort
Wow.
of moving. And we're never leaving the Gulf of Mexico. Like,
It's gonna be
I've
nice.
been on this boat. My partner, Doug Shaw, gets seasickness if he looks at a snail,
Wow.
going further. No pills, no sea bands, no nothing. This should be one of the smoothest ever cruises you'll ever be on in your life. And so,
Wow. Don't let something and I'm not trying to mean anybody's like challenges physically, but man, don't let something as simple as seasickness, which even if we weren't in the Gulf of Mexico, but like you said, there are certain pills, there are the bands, all that stuff. Don't let something like that take away from the opportunity of number one, memories, number two, bonding with your team, and number three, getting to know that many other people that you can build that relationship with. That
yeah.
like overcome that. And if you need help in doing so, reach out to me. I'll give you some mindset coaching stuff. I know Glenn will too. Like let's not make that the excuse.
I'll send them seasick pills and a wristband,
There you go. That
which
makes
they'll
sense.
hopefully never use.
Well, okay. So we need everybody to go to the website, check it out. Just at least, talk with your team, talk with your spouse about it. I think it's a good idea. And I'm super grateful that you're doing this. I think it's gonna be so much fun. Tons of memories are gonna be made.
Yeah.
And it's going to be talked about forever. Talk about the social media on that sucker. That's going to be so much fun.
Yeah. FOMO is going to be crazy.
FOMO for sure, right? Well, here's the deal. We end every show, and first of all, thank you for being on the show and having this. I've really enjoyed this conversation personally. There have been some things that you've said that I'm like, geez, that hit me. I needed to hear that today. So thank you for that. And just for being someone who is willing to be brave and step out there and do what you do. We end the show with 4 questions I ask everybody based upon ROLE or role, because I think everybody has a role to play in this world, in their office, with their team members. They're just quick off the top of your head answers. You willing
Yeah.
to play?
Absolutely. Looking forward to it. And thank you for the opportunity. It means the
Yeah,
world to me, Dino.
absolutely. First question is about responsibility. What is your highest and greatest responsibility on this earth?
Helping others.
Nice. Number 2 is about outcome. What do you want or hope is the ultimate outcome for your life?
Okay. I left the world a better place than the one I came into.
Love it. Next is about leadership. You've seen a lot. You are a good leader. What is true leadership?
Ah, helping people achieve something they never thought that they could do without guidance or
Ooh,
without motivation. Getting them to achieve something in their life that they never would have achieved on their own.
I love that. Last one's a little deep, but the fact of the matter is,
Those were shallow.
sorry.
If those are the shallow ones, I'm afraid to see what's coming next.
Yeah, this is the one that a lot
What's
of
your
people.
favorite flavor ice cream?
It's about experience. And the fact of the matter is that we all will have a final day on this planet. And I pray it's far, far, far from now, anytime soon.
Yeah.
But there will be a day where we leave this earth. What experience do you hope or want to have between now and dead?
That is a tough one. I've never given that any thought. And I'm sorry I'm remiss in not knowing your 4 questions. That's on me.
No, I don't tell anybody what they are beforehand.
So what experience?
What experience do you hope or want to have in your life between now and dead?
Wow. It's such a hard question for me to answer because I have everything I want in life right now. I want for truly nothing. I don't need anything special. I mean, it's special, but the first thing that came to mind, you said, always say what's first thing on my mind, is just a nice quiet time in a relaxing environment on a beach next to my wife, just taking each other's love for one another. That's it. Just the quiet moments that come from you being in love with somebody and then loving you unconditionally and just being there with each other. For me, I know it's mundane. I know it's not climbing Everest or
No.
driving an F-150. But when you asked me that question, I just pictured a sunny day next to my wife with us just being with each other, just being there next to each other. To
I
me,
love it.
that's the experience that I don't think you could get. I think there's more exciting things you could have, but I don't think there's any deeper feeling for me than knowing that that is there with me from now until dead, right? I don't need the one thing. I
Yep.
want the constant thing.
I love that. Yep. So great. Love it.
Oh,
So the thing I
sorry.
love, no, don't be sorry. This is a great answer. The thing I love about the questions is they're meant to, number one, obviously help you think, but number two is it's just a matter. I think if we all ask ourselves those questions on a continual basis, it'll help us make better decisions and more thoughtful decisions every day in our life. So thank you for sharing that with us. It really means a lot.
Thank
And it
you.
means a lot for you to be on this podcast. It really does. I know that I learned a lot. I gotta believe there are people who pulled the car over and are taking notes or stopped the treadmill and are typing on their phones right now. So thank you so much for being a part of it.
Thank you, Dino, for having me. Truly, it's been an honor, and I'm humbled you'd even ask.
Well, everyone, thanks again for tuning in for the Own Your Role podcast. And you are more than welcome, Dr. Glenn Krieger, for being awesome and
Thank
for
you.
being a great guest. And can't wait to see the reaction that this podcast gets with others. Remember, those of you, if you are listening to the show for the first time, please like and share on the YouTube channel so you make sure you get notified when the next show comes out. And again, I hope to see you on the OP Summit at Sea event. We will see you there. And everybody, thank you for tuning in to the Own Your Role podcast.